Good evening and thank you for attending. I'd like to welcome members, officers and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work. James.
Thank you, Chair. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the Chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the Chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. Voting, when requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the Chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we proceed? Well, thank you. Back to you then, Chair.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies for absence from Councillors Bryony May, Ruth Brown and Emma Fernandez. Having given due notice, Councillor Tina Bartos will substitute for Councillor May, Councillor John Claydon will substitute for Councillor Brown, and Councillor Mick Debenham will substitute for Councillor Fernandez. Welcome to the substitutes. Any further apologies? Cool. Item 2, notification of other business. There is none. Item 3, Chair's announcements. 1, recording. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. 2, declaration of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. 3, to clarify matters for the registered speakers. Thank you to members of the public for joining us this evening. To confirm, you will have between 3 and 5 minutes, as advertised by the committee services team, to make your verbal presentation to the committee. All speakers will receive a warning when you have 1 minute remaining. Following the conclusion of your time, members will be invited to ask points of clarification. At the end of your allotted time, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and you must cease. 4, debate procedure. In order to move to a debate on an item, we will require a proposer and seconder for a motion at the appropriate time in the meeting. This should take into account the information in the officer's report and will follow the officer presentation and any public presentations, including member advocates, as well as any questions of the officer and points of clarification for the public presenters. As a reminder for members, should you wish to propose a motion contrary to the recommendations including in the officer report, you will be required to provide clear and evidence reasons for this proposal. 5, section 4.8.23a. For the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration for that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. 6, meeting cut-off. As outlined under 4.8.24g of the Council's Constitution, if the meeting proceeds to 10:30 p.m, the item being considered at that time will be the final item considered at tonight's meeting. The remaining business will be deferred to the next meeting on Tuesday, the 24th of February. 4, public participation. For item 5, I have Rowan Skinner, Parish Councillor Philip Crowe, Councillor Louise Peace, Paul Watson. Thank you. For item 6, I have Philip Laws. Thank you. Linda Eaton, Parish Councillor Philip Crowe, and Councillor Louise Peace. There's a pattern emerging here. Before we move on to the applications, there was some small supplementary papers. Did the members of the committee see that have a chance to read the supplementary papers? Yep. Okay. Item 5, application 25-01094FP, land to the rear of 34 Olsey Road, Ickleford. Thomas Howe to present. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry.
I believe Councillor Peace may wait to declare something. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking as member advocate on both these applications this evening, so I will move from this bench to that bench. Thank you.
Did you not have to leave the room? Is it only me who has to do that?
Just. It's an institution. James, but she's speaking as member advocate.
Yeah, but oh yeah. When I've done it, when I've spoken, I've been chucked down. So
She probably should come out, double check with James. She might
Yeah.
come back when she's just sleeps and then leave.
yeah, I think she's okay to stay now. Or just So we're just discussing your fate here, Louise. I think from precedent, what happens is after you've spoken on this item, you get slung out, yeah, and you can come back in for the second one. Is that okay? Yeah. I didn't want you to think I was being rude. Right, where do we get to? Thomas, how to present, Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. And further to the written supplement yesterday, I have some further updates which I will share verbally with you. So, of course, I'll also read them out in addition to what was shared yesterday. Representation was received from the Conservation Officer. The conclusion of this says, I have not identified any harms that would deem this proposal unacceptable in heritage terms. And this representation made reference to the listed church, the listed buildings on Alsey Road, and also the allocation requirements. I've spoken to Hertfordshire Archaeology, and they have had sight of the written scheme of investigation and trial trenching report, and they have advised me that the conditions recommended can now be removed, and that the findings from the reports meant that no conditions were needed. I've also been in receipt of some updated plans, which are 010203, which were just updated to show the now North Herts requirements for 5 bins, I think an additional caddy or another bin, and also just to make it clear the locations of the air source heat pumps. They were on the original plans, but this is just a bit more clearer. The Environment Agency have also made representation, and this should be now visible online. Basically, their comment advises no objection. Their comment also advises that the sequential test can apply, but in this case, I spoke to planning policy, and they've advised basically the sequential test is necessary because some parts of the site are in a flood zone. And I spoke to planning policy, and the sequential test was applied during the allocation for the site. So the sequential test has already been done, so it doesn't need to occur in this instance. Their comment also advises, or at least recommends, the applicants to use any water saving measures in the new houses. Otherwise, that was all they had to say. Anglian Water have been in negotiations with the applicant about the Anglian Water condition. Effectively, they objected, but then recommended a condition. This has been updated in agreement with the applicant to advise that a strategy or any other solution can be acceptable, be it on site or connection, as part of the recommendations by Anglian Water. Also, an extension of time has been agreed with the applicant until the 19th of February, which is 7 days from today. Also, I note that an objector has raised queries with regards to the consideration of their comments and the summarization of them in the report. I can confirm that the comment was read and that the officers consider that the matters raised are suitably covered within the committee report, but also this would not have changed our recommendation. Furthermore, my written update advised of potential changes to the contamination conditions. However, this will no longer be happening, and the originally agreed and proposed contamination condition will remain. And also, I have asked the applicant for agreement on a pre-commencement landscaping condition, but we're just discussing that further still. And as such, I believe the application should be recommended to grant conditional permission subject to the addition of the Anglian water condition, any changes to the conditions I've just discussed, and if there is agreement to the landscaping condition with the applicant. Thank you. That is my update. Please can we start the presentation? This is the site plan or red line plan with the main allocation area as the main area to the south, with the swale going off to the north. The next slide, please. And this is the proposed site plan. The left one shows the swale in full with the dwelling layout, whilst the right-hand one is more of a zoomed in one showing the layout of proposed layout of the dwellings. Next slide, please. This is the beginning of my photo presentation. This is a view of the access point on Duncotts Close. Next slide, please. And then this is the opposite view looking out from the site back down Duncotts Close, the other side of the hedge. Next slide, please. And this is a view down Duncotts Close towards Alsey Road, standing with my back to the main entrance of the site. The next slide, please. This is from within the application site. That is an old photo, but I know it's been discussed previously just by objectors, but it shows a now felled poplar tree along the eastern boundary. Next slide, please. And this is now a view of the present site with Duncotts Close on the right and within the application site. Next slide, please. And then this is looking along the southern southeastern corner of the site towards Duncotts Close. And the next slide, please. And this is looking back towards number 34 Alsey Road, looking northwest approximately. Next slide, please. This is looking closer in towards some of the neighbouring dwellings along Duncotts Close. And the next slide, please. And then a further left view towards the southeastern corner of the site. Next slide, please. This is the southeastern corner of the site, but again, looking a bit further left, or to the left of that position. The next slide, please. And then further round the boundary, so looking slightly north. This is the approximate location of the previous tree. Next slide, please. And then this is looking north towards up the site from approximately the right-hand centre area of the site. Next slide, please. And then a further left photo looking back towards number 34 and also the kind of the northern boundary of the allocation site. And the next slide, please. And then looking back, actually no, this is in the northern portion of the site looking north. But this is outside the application site, but it's just providing some views of the area. Next slide, please. And then this is looking back down across the site. So the line of hedge and tree you see is the boundary of the site, and then just beyond that is where the application site is. And the next slide, please. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Do members have any questions for the planning officer? Councillor Clayton, John.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick clarification. Thank you for running through the changes to the conditions. Just with regard to the Environment Agency one, it's mentioned in the supplementary report that it suggests a condition awaiting a response from the Environment Agency, but you have that now, right? So are we not suggesting any condition associated with that anymore?
I'm happy to say that. No conditions recommended by them. They just said no objection and then just provided the advice about the sequential test.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Thomas. In the papers, it details a letter from the Flood Authority dated 17th of December, which lists some conditions that have to be met before any work can. So the actual conditions are a surface water drainage scheme, surface water management plan, which is part of the construction during construction, and then a sustainable drainage scheme.
Yeah.
And they all have to. We have to have suitable sort of plans for those before anything can proceed. When those plans come in, will that all have to come back to the committee, or will that be sort of adjudicated on by officers?
I don't believe discharge from condition normally go to committee. I'll set that Sam aside, but yeah.
Sam, do you want to add to that?
What it came on for me. Wonderful. No, we have, well, details reserved by condition are delegated to officer level to determine.
Okay, can I just come back on that? So because this has been called in, and because this site is on a floodplain, drainage is obviously quite a key issue here for me. And I think if we had drainage plans here tonight, or what the plans are in black and white, it could very well, affect our judgment. So for us not to, for it to be called in and come to the committee tonight, but then for us to not see or not adjudicate on such a key element in my mind. But if that's a statutory matter, is it?
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, the condition has been deemed necessary by the lead local flood authority, so they don't believe that the details worked up in any further detail are required at this point in time to determine the application. When the details to approve those conditions are submitted to us, we will consult the lead local flood authority, and if they are satisfied that it is acceptable and that it's gone through the hierarchy of sustainable urban drainage, then we will discharge or approve the details reserved by that condition. So our input at officer level is going to the lead local flood authority and making sure that it's okay with them as the experts.
Okay.
If we came back to the committee, that would be that would be ultimately what we would present.
Okay.
And and it also, in terms of a present, we obviously deal with quite a few applications where there are quite a few tricky matters that are reserved by condition or obligation or any other matter. And the reason we have to approve applications that can be suitably dealt with by condition.
Thank you. So one other.
Can I ask a quick supplementary? So
Yeah,
jumping in front of you,
yeah.
Dave. You said if authority, if they were satisfied, and if they weren't.
If the lead local flood authority weren't satisfied with the details submitted for approval, we would follow their recommendation and we would refuse those details.
Sorry,
Dave.
one
Yeah,
one other quick one related to drainage. So obviously on that plan, it shows the long sort of strip going to the north, which is listed as a swale, and then at the top of it, it joins an existing swale, which is getting very close to the river. So is that not a drainage solution? Is that because obviously we're waiting for a drainage plan, but on the plan shows a swale joining another swale that looks very close to the river Purwell or whatever it is his at that stage.
Oh, my mic's still on. Some details have obviously been submitted with the application in respect to surface water drainage, as we would expect. The lead local flood authority would want enhanced details just to firm everything up that's in the initial submissions. I'm just looking now for the submissions, the flood risk assessment data. So yeah, there are some details submitted, but obviously that's not quite sufficient for the lead local flood authority at this stage.
Thank you.
Thomas, I don't know if you have your light on. Did you want to add to that?
I think it's just remained on.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
No problem. Councillor Tyson, Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Thomas, I just want to pick up on a sentence in your report where in paragraph 4.3.19, which unfortunately is quite a lengthy one, but it's the sentence that begins at the start of line 4 with impacts from the proximity and bulk of the new dwelling are noted. However, given the distance to the primary habitable spaces of this property and the large plot size, losses of light and dominance are not considered to be acceptable. Is that what you meant to say? Sorry if I'm being pedantic about this, but
Oh yeah, is it 4.3.18? Did you say, or 19?
19, and it's the sentence bit that begins on line 4, impacts. Oh, losses of light and dominance are not considered to be acceptable.
I think that
Did you mean
would,
unacceptable?
yes, I think
Yeah.
unacceptable, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I did have a question about that swale, the extended length of the application site. As it's part of the site, who assumes responsibility for the maintenance of that?
I understand that in the flood risk assessment, it's within the control of the landowner. So I believe, well, the agents, I'm sure, planning agents, I'm sure, might be able to assist, but the
Okay,
flood risk
come back
assessment
to
says
that.
it will remain in ownership of the landowner.
Thank you.
Okay, well, perhaps when the applicant's agent speaks later on, they can pick that up, if that's okay. Councillor Ian Mandel, in.
Am I reading right that the construction management plan is required twice in the conditions, 12 and 18? Or is there some difference or significance in them?
I believe one was recommended by Highways, and I believe the other might have been from Environmental Health. So I think they're seeking alternative. I think one is about mitigating, say, construction almost nuisance, whilst I believe, which is number 18, whilst number 12 is directly from Highways. So I believe that would probably be more about, say, deliveries and accessing and routing and such, rather than nuisance, say from dust and noise.
Fine.
Oh, actually, sorry, on that point, one of them is a construction traffic management plan, whilst the other one is a
Construction traffic management plan.
just a plain construction management plan. But yeah, there you go.
Thanks for that. Is that your
Well,
question?
fine. If we want to duplicate, I'm interested. I'd be interested to see the enforcement of that one.
Yeah, I tend to err on rather too many conditions and not enough, but we shall see. Councillor Clayton, John.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question, given about BNG, given that there is no plans to deliver biodiversity net gain on the site itself, are there any constraints that apply to where that would be delivered? For example, does it need to be delivered elsewhere within the district, or?
Well, of course, the biodiversity net gain condition was added to provide, of course, the off-site requirements for delivery of BNG. I'm not sure personally where they would go. I could defer to Sam, but yes, it would be off-site, but where that would be detailed with any submission, unless there's a requirement.
Sam, were you able to add to that?
Yeah, happy to. Obviously, the ideal is that the biodiversity offsite.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Do you want
lean
to
a little
get
bit closer.
closer?
You're speaking quite softly. It's quite.
So yeah, the biodiversity net gain in an ideal world will be as close as possible to the site, and all those details are reserved by condition. We'll see which sites are available as close as possible to the site to achieve that off-site net gain. But
Okay.
the ideal, the starting point is the closest possible site that is available. As an absolute last resort, there's always biodiversity credits, which we have no control over where they go.
I mean, that the credits are referred to explicitly in the report, so I wonder whether that was the planned approach.
I'll refer to Thomas on that one.
Sure. So I'm just putting up
Sorry to
the,
be awkward.
ecologist response. And
It's paragraph 4.3.24 in the report, if that's helpful.
yes, so the ecologist discussed that there'll be a shortfall of 1.57, which would be secured through off-site credits, which would be secured via the standard BNG condition. That was from their September, the 25th of September representation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have no more questions from members, so we will move on. We have the first public objector, who is Rowan Skinner. Rowan, you have 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have a minute left. I shall gently remind you when your time is up. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. So, Rowan Skinner, I live on Duncots Close. I'm here to represent the views of my fellow residents on the close. Firstly, we were not consulted on this prior to the application being submitted. We've raised a number of serious concerns, including loss of parking and privacy, the felling of the trees and the habitat loss, the construction impact, and the fact this is building on a floodplain. However, for brevity, I'll focus on two fundamental planning issues: road safety and wastewater. The first road safety issue is that the access is proposed via Duncots Close. It's a 30-mile-an-hour residential road with no pavement, as you've clearly seen in the photos today. Pedestrians and vehicles are forced to mix. The second road safety issue is that the proposed access point into the development is within a turning head. This creates a dangerous blind zone with the existing access to houses 3 to 6 Duncots Close. Both these points were noted in the original Highways report issued in May 25. I quote, "Duncots Close is a car-dominated road. Pedestrian movements are not safe." The increased traffic would increase the probability of an accident, especially with such a confused layout around the turning head. Whilst the Hertfordshire County Council Place and Movement Plan may allow for this, policy compliance doesn't override these site-specific safety concerns. It also appears this is not the full extent of the development, as the layout is provisioning for future expansion to the north of the site as detailed in the planning documents. This means these traffic impacts will be greater in the future. Therefore, these plans are not even future-proof. We would like to see safer access routes considered as part of the planning application, such as access via the applicant's property at 34 Olsey Road.
1 minute.
The second issue, wastewater. The plan does not detail how sewage will be managed from the site without causing adverse impacts to the local community. Anglian Water's only confirmed there's processing capacity at the sewage works, not within the pipes. We've provided clear evidence that during heavy rainfall, the pipes are beyond capacity and effluent has discharged into the gardens of Duncots Close and Laurel Way on multiple occasions. Without a robust and evidenced drainage strategy issued, it creates an unacceptable risk of further foul water flooding and the associated health impacts. Another reason we think this planning application shouldn't be granted. So in conclusion, the plans as submitted, in our view, are not fit for purpose and clearly create a very significant safety risk to us, the local community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any points of clarification from the speaker? Parish Councillor Philip Crowe. Councillor Crowe, you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have a minute left.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Philip Crowe, representing Ickleford Parish Council. IC1 along with IC2, IC3 and LS1, when first put forward as a proposed site for the local plan, it was agreed only after a decision made by the government inspector to accept the local plan sites. Since that decision, circumstances have seriously changed in that Windfall sites, 3 completed, 2 about to commence, and several infill sites in the application have exacerbated the situation that has plagued Ickleford for many years, namely the Victorian sewerage system, which on a regular basis, because of the inability to cope with stormwater runoff, brings havoc to certain roads with a backwash of sewerage rising in gardens more repulsively homes. With IC1, no thought has been given to runoff water. The idea of using a local watercourse to deposit directly into the River Hiz, which is a protected chalk stream, needs to be seriously addressed, as is the disposal of sewage and flooding. Dunker's Close residents who are tied with the proposed IC1 development regularly suffer the humiliation and intimidation of having to deal with such a problem. Dunker's is a courtyard development of 8 houses. It is entered by a road wide enough to accommodate 2 cars passing. There are no footpaths, just grass verges. The lack of footpaths has never caused a problem, as residents enter the road at a sensible speed, knowing that children could be at play. The IC1 developer has taken it for granted that to enter this development, they will use Dunker's Close as a means to bring everything needed to and from the site. After completion, the new homeowners will also have to access to and from Dunker's Close. It must be borne in mind that IC1 will never meet the proposals as agreed by the terms of the local plan. Like IC2 and the windfall sites, it will be aimed at the wealthier purchaser instead of those locally trying to get on the housing ladder and fulfilling the government's housing aims. The Ickleford Parish Council have asked the Planning Committee on 2 occasions to date to please give serious consideration to deferring all future development in and around Ickleford until Anglian Water finds an acceptable solution for the disposal of runoff water and, more importantly, wastewater and sewerage by a suitable network that can not only accommodate existing residences, but those of the future. We therefore ask this planning committee to not only refuse IC1 for not being able to fulfil the local plan, but more importantly, ensure that there is a deferment of all future planning applications until a suitable infrastructure is in place to accommodate the present and future expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Are there any points of clarification from members? No. Okay. I now have member advocate, Councillor Louise Peace. Councillor Peace, you have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got a minute left.
Thank you, Chair. There are 3 reasons to refuse this application. The first is sewage and drainage. Anglian Water have objected to this connection due to capacity constraints and pollution risk. The foul water system in Ickleford is old and in need of considerable investment. Residents at neighbouring Dunker's Close have experienced sewage flooding onto their property after heavy rainfalls. The drainage plans for the site are unacceptable. The applicant states that infiltration drainage methods are not possible due to the high groundwater table. They say it is proposed to convey flows to an existing tributary of the River Purwell. The watercourse referred to is not the River Purwell, it is the River Hiz, an example of one of the world's rarest and most vulnerable habitats, a chalk stream. Chalk streams are fed from water that is filtered through chalk, producing clear, cold water. Runoff from drainage systems such as this proposal increases the levels of pollutants from road runoff such as oils, heavy metals and microplastics. Neighbourhood Plan Policy E2 says that development should enhance the historic and natural landscape, including the delicate chalk rivers. This application is in clear contradiction of that policy. The second reason is due to loss of biodiversity. Before this application was submitted, a veteran poplar tree was felled at the site. The stump of this tree, which was used by the local owl population in the past, is over 1.5 metres in diameter. North Herts ecologist reported that the felled poplar shows good signs of regeneration and could potentially come back as a coppice feature were sufficient space provided, not the minimal 1 metre shown on the landscape master plan. The planning officer's report notes that the development would benefit from 31.13% of habitat unit loss. I fail to see how that is a benefit. It is contrary to Local Plan Policy NE4 and Ickleford Neighbourhood Plan Policy E4, which both state that measurable gains in BNG should be provided. The UK is one of the most habitat-depleted countries in the world, we should not be offering the opportunity to destroy habitat simply by purchasing credits elsewhere when mitigation on site is possible. One of the reasons that BNG cannot be maintained or enhanced on the site is because the site is overdeveloped as submitted, which is the third reason this application should be refused. The local plan states that on a site like this, applicants should make an initial assumption of 60% larger and 40% smaller homes. On this site, there are 78% larger homes and only 22% one or two smaller homes. We have 22% of smaller homes here, where there should be 40%. That's approximately half of what we should have. A housing needs assessment for Ickleford was done in 2021. It said market housing, even with the benefit of a higher than average income, is likely to remain out of reach to most. In Ickleford, an appropriate response would be to prioritise the supply of smaller to mid-sized dwellings of 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms. This was captured in Neighbourhood Plan Policy SD2, which said that proposals including smaller homes would be supported. This application includes 5 homes of 4 bedrooms and greater. Houses of this size will not meet local need. The officer's report also makes reference to the overdevelopment, noting that the proposal represents approximately 23.7 dwellings per hectare. The Ickleford Design Code, done as part of our neighbourhood plan, states that in new developments, the maximum density should be no more than 20 dwellings per hectare, so this development is contrary to this. Committee, I ask you to refuse this application as submitted for the 3 reasons I gave: drainage, habitat loss and overdevelopment.
1 minute.
The local plan allocates 9 dwellings in this location, but this application is an overdevelopment of the site, cramming in overly large houses with plots 7 and 8 partly in flood zone 2. The overdevelopment means that the housing is too dense, does not meet local need and results in 31% BNG loss. It does not adequately reinforce planting along site boundaries to minimise heritage and greenbelt impacts as requested by the local plan inspector. There is no drainage option other than to risk polluting a chalk stream. These issues more than compensate for a lack of 5-year land supply. The NPPF states that off-site BNG credits should be a last resort. Leaving a portion of the site as habitat, potentially a suds pond, or by building smaller homes, could mitigate the loss of BNG, solve the drainage issues, and deliver a development in line with local and neighbourhood plan policy, not conflict with them. We need to build the right homes in the right places. In my opinion, an allocated site is the right place, but these are not the right homes.
Thank you. Do members have any points of clarification for Councillor Peace? No? Okay. In which case, may I call the applicant's agent, Paul Watson? Yep, apparently so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, also speaks to them.
Paul, you have 5 minutes and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee and officers. As you are aware, this application is seeking planning permission to allow the construction of a mix of 9 new family homes on the land at Dunker's Close. As you've also heard, the site is allocated for development under policy IC1 of the local plan adopted in November 2022. Following that allocation, we have engaged with 2 rounds of pre-application discussions with officers, the initial one in 2023, followed by a further round in 2024. So the scheme that you see before you this evening has been shaped quite directly by the very helpful advice received, particularly in terms of the dwelling mix, the layout, the scale and material choices for the new homes. Officers' report summarises quite well at paragraph 438 that the appearance of the dwellings is considered to be suitably traditional in nature and would incorporate local design cues reflecting the vernacular of the area in terms of scale, built form, appearance and materiality. I was going to say quite a lot more about design and the appearance, but I'll try and pick up on, to be helpful, some of the points that have been raised. So obviously, in addition to design and character, it's very important that the site comes forward in a way that is appropriate in terms of the technical matters that have been raised. In terms of access, this is proposed to be taken from Dunker's Close, and it is in the position that was envisaged when the site was allocated and considered by the inspector. Hertfordshire County Highway raised no objection, as you've heard, subject to conditions. A sustainable drainage scheme has been submitted, and it is in accordance with policy requirements. It's designed to accommodate a 1 in 100-year storm event, plus an allowance of 40% to account for future climate change. This includes the use of permeable paving within the site and associated attenuation crates below, and a control of the runoff to greenfield rates. So in terms of the development, the principle is that water will not leave the site at any greater rate than it does today. This has been fully assessed by the lead local flood authority. They raised no objection, subject to a condition for the fine detail of the scheme, but they have seen the scheme. Sewage capacity. We obviously had an initial response from Anglian Water. They requested that we submit what's called a pre-development inquiry about capacity and connection, which we've done. We've had the response from Anglian Water, and residents are correct. They do not wish a connection into the system in Dunker's Close, but what they have asked us to do is connect in further to the south of Dunker's Close. So that will obviously be more expensive for the applicant, but it's something that has to be done. So a connection and capacity is acceptable in principle. We're also looking at other options, and that's why the condition proposed allows for that to be taken forward in that way. As you've heard, an archaeological assessment has been done. That includes trial trenching. That's been submitted to Herts Archaeology. They are happy with that, requiring no further work to be done. And as you've also heard, the council's conservation officer is happy with the heritage impacts of the development. The scheme does try to maximise biodiversity net gain on site. You won't be surprised that that's the best thing for a developer, because it's the cheapest and best way to do it, and it makes the site mature and better. But on smaller sites, it's very, very difficult to get to a 10% net gain. So a condition is required to secure the balance off-site, as we've heard, and that's been agreed with your ecology officer. So in very brief conclusion, again, just point to what is a really helpful summary at 441 to 443 of the officer's report, where he goes through the planning balance, highlights the allocated nature of the site, no conflicts with other wider general policies, no harms in terms of other material considerations, highlights the social and economic benefits of the site, the benefits of the new housing in the context of the current shortfall in the 5-year supply, and overall that the assessment is the proposal complies with the development plan and the national planning policy framework. And so I'm respectfully asking the committee to support the officer's recommendation and grant permission this evening. Thank you very much. And any questions, I'll try and answer if I can.
Thanks, Paul. Are there any points of clarification from members? Oh, it was a race to the button there. Councillor Clayton, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair. Predictably, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked earlier. Wondering whether you can clarify plans to deliver B&G off-site, whether there are any specific details of where that might in practice be delivered.
Thank you, Councillor. The discussions we had with your ecology officer was to try and maximise what we could do on the site, which has been done. And then her advice was that it be secured by a credit purchase off-site. So it would be a purchase of credits rather than a specific scheme. Obviously, when you purchase the credits, you have to know where that's going. And we would have to put forward a scheme to your officers to say, these are the credits we think we want to purchase, this is where they would be spent, and this is what they would be doing. And obviously you would have to be happy with what that scheme was.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, two points. One was about the maintenance of the swale on the allocated site plan, which I asked about earlier. And the second one is to do, just going back to the drainage situation and the sewage, well, the potential inadequacy of the system. You said that you were Anglian Water were looking for a connection, therefore, further south of Dunquots Close, and that you said you were also looking at other options. Is it possible to get a brief outline of what those other options might entail?
Certainly, Councillor. On the Swale, that land is owned by the person who owns the allocated site. He actually is the gentleman who lives in the neighbouring property. I believe he has promoted that site separately to anything I'm involved with as part of your local plan review process. Our clients, who are the applicant here, have agreed with that owner that for this site to come forward in the way we'd like it to, that we need to take that strip of land. And so that will be maintained by our clients as part of their purchase of the site. If planning permission is granted, they take ownership of the site and will also take ownership of that swale along the side of the field. So that would be maintained by ourselves. In terms of sewage, it's very likely, I would say, that we will connect into the Anglian Water system, which would be south of the entrance to Dunquots Close in the road. My reference to other options is that it is possible to have, you probably heard of in other schemes, an on-site treatment plant like a Cloudchester or something like that. If for any reason it became very prohibitive or horrendously costly to do the link, we'd come back with a Cloudchester scheme. But again, that would be something that would have to be agreed with your officers in consultation with Anglian Water and Environment Agency. So it'd be covered with the details of what comes forward in the condition.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Prescott, Martin.
Just picking up on that last point in response to Councillor Tyson's inquiry, if we're talking about a Cloudchester scheme, are we talking about one which will be communal, or are you talking about separate for each property?
I believe it would be one that would be communal, but I say it's only in there as a sort of a fallback option if for any reason further detailed discussions with Anglian Water meant the connection into the main system was difficult. It hasn't been investigated in detail as to the detail of that scheme, because the proposed and preferred option is to link in with Anglian Water.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any further questions to the applicant's agent? No. I've got a green light. Martin.
It's not a question for the applicant's agent because I've asked that question, but can I ask, before we move to debate, can I just ask one question of the officer? Oh.
What's that before you went back? Before we get the next stage after I've ascertained we have no more questions to the applicant's agent is to go back to the officers. Okay. So do we have any further questions to the applicant's agent? No. In which case we will return to the officers. Thomas.
We were discussing, I'll read out the wording for the Anglian Water condition, just so that you're aware of its wording. So it says no development shall commence until a strategic foul water strategy or any other solution has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultation with Anglian Water. The strategy will identify a sustainable point of connection to the public foul network or any other solution. Prior to occupation, the foul water drainage works must have been carried out in accordance with the approved scheme. So that was agreed with the agent, and that was, as Mr. Watson was saying, the other solutions of on-site treatment. And also the third condition submitted by the LLFA is in regards to the maintenance and management of substructures for the lifetime of the development. So yes, I feel that may contribute to Councillor Tyson's questions as well. Also, Councillor Peace mentioned about the Stome or one of the reports mentioning the Purwell. And discussions with the Environment Agency, they did reference that it was the his, so that was considered correctly. Wise. I have no other further comments to add unless Sam does or anyone from officers.
Thank you. Sam, did you have anything further to add? No. Okay. Do we have any further questions to the officers? Martin.
So I wanted to come back actually specifically on the revised Anglian Water condition. I presume we're talking about a revision to condition 15.
No, it's basically since the committee reports were shared, I was negotiating the condition with the agent. So I believe a resolution to grants would include that the condition I just read out and any others we may agree, but it's not condition 15.
Okay, just to be absolutely clear, and I'm relying upon the experience of BK3, which Sam is very clear on, in that we had another site, a significantly larger site, that it was deemed that there was insufficient wastewater capacity, foul water capacity within the local system, and the condition stated clearly that no construction would commence. And the reason I referenced condition 15, because it says shall not be occupied, whereas I think not commenced until the foul water question has been resolved to the satisfaction of the local authority. I just want to be absolutely clear that that is the case. So no shovels in the ground until we're completely confident that the foul water has been resolved, and then no occupation until the foul water solution has been implemented.
I'll read out the condition wording again, which
I think you did say that, but I just want to be completely clear.
It says, so pre-commencement, it is a strategic foul water strategy or any other solution has to be agreed by the local planning authority in consultation with Anglian Water. And then occupation is that it must have been carried out in accordance with that approved scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns about the whole flooding and foul water and ecological situation, given the sensitivity of the site in terms of its flooding risk and the chalk stream and so forth. Given that these conditions will apply and will have to be resolved before the actual work starts, apart from the scheduling issue of getting the application back to this committee, is there a good reason why we shouldn't defer this so that those issues could be looked at more in more detail and we can consider them? Because I'm mindful also of the point that Councillor Winstanley made later, that this is our only chance essentially to see this. Obviously this is a somewhat leading question, but I'm just wondering, from your point of view, do you see a good major downside with a deferral?
Well, I would say, oh, sorry, Councillor. I would echo what Sam said in that the details will be shared with the quote unquote experts, and that they would have to be implemented in accordance with their agreement. But I'll defer to Sam about the deferral of the decision. Yes.
Yeah, of course. So local planning authorities should consider whether otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the use of conditions. In this case, all of the technical consultees that we have consulted have said that the development can be made acceptable through the use of conditions. If we were to go back and say we need all of those dealt with prior to making the decision on the application, we would be acting contrary to the technical experts on that who consider that a condition is acceptable, and it would be ultimately up to the developer. We've got an extension in time until the 19th of February. After that date, it's up to the developer to decide whether to action a ability to appeal the non-determination of the application by the local planning authority. I can't say whether they would or wouldn't, but it's a material consideration that we have to be cognizant of when we are not making a decision on an application. And I'm not sure whether we have sufficient evidence before us that the conditions that have been recommended by the technical experts cannot make the development acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Martin.
Yeah, I hate to keep banging on the same point, but this is really what's been brought up by several members of the committee. Firstly, I'm a little concerned that this application's been the plans have been in the development stage for quite a long time, and I'm concerned that this foul water issue has not been resolved. I'm also concerned that if it cannot be resolved to the satisfaction of everybody using the existing foul water system wherever it connects to it, and it does go down a private drainage route, I really think we need to see some plans, because if the development site is fairly dense, and a substantial Clargester installation will need to be thought out very carefully, because apart from anything else, you need access to drain it on occasion. All of these things need consideration, and I think the right forum is the committee.
Sam, did you wish to come back?
My microphone's on, so I will. I mean, I'd like some further time to consider the response, but I think from what you're saying is you don't believe that the use of the words any other solution is acceptable within the condition, whereas if it didn't include the words any other solution, there wouldn't be a particular issue with the condition.
What I mean, we've got to. I mean, this is not a theoretical situation. I mean, there has to be a solution to the foul water problem, and I mean, I accept that a private drainage solution, while maybe not my first choice, it is a viable solution. But a communal private drainage solution is a big thing. It's a big piece of equipment that will have to be sunk underground somewhere. I'm sure they're not going to want it surface mounted, so it'll take up a lot of space. I mean, the drainage pipes will have to be in there anyway, no matter what they do. But you need to have access to get it drained or maintained. It will affect the design of. I'm pretty sure it should affect the design of the development, and I think we need to see that. And as I say, I think we've got to this point by the fact that this foul water question has not been resolved throughout all the many months that this has been on the drawing board, which I find somewhat surprising. Silence denotes
No, I'm considering.
Okay.
In the meantime, Councillor Bryant.
Trying to think back through similar applications, and I cannot think of any application where we've actually dealt in this amount of detail with foul water. But usually that it's just taken as said that in fact the water company will actually, the onus is on them legally to actually come up with a solution. Now I may be wrong on that, and Sam can tell me if I'm wrong.
Sam.
There we go. So I'll come back to Councillor Prescott first, if I can, because I've had time to consider. At the moment, the condition does have that alternative options to the foul water drainage connection to Anglian Water. That's been discussed with the applicant, and that's the amendment to the condition that's been agreed. Now, if we don't agree that condition, well, if it's a pre-commencement condition, which goes to the heart of the permission, we do need the written consent of the applicant to impose that condition. At the moment, we don't have the written consent of the applicant to impose the condition without the word any other option. So we would then have to decide whether or not that results in harm that significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits of the proposal. Trying to find a way to answer the question a bit better, but hopefully that helps a little bit in respect to the other options, which seems to be the primary concern. What are the alternative options? And that coming back to committee, if it were an alternative option to connect into the foul water drainage. If there's any other suggestions that I can think through, I'd welcome them as to how to square the circle, as it were, in respect to your concerns. I'm trying to think of them as fast as I can, but that's what I've got for now. I hope it doesn't raise more questions. Sorry, Councillor Bryant, your question, could you just summarise it again for me?
In my memory, I don't remember an application where we've gone to this much detail about foul water. That usually it is taken as said that the water company will deal with it because statutorily they have to deal with it before construction can take place.
Yes, there is a statutory requirement for foul water undertakers and water providers to provide a connection, but they contend that there isn't said requirement for new developments. In this case, it's a planned development that's been in our local plan for as long as it's existed, in terms of every form of it as it's gone through the examination. So I see no particular reason why Anglian Water couldn't have prepared for the development and planned for the development in advance. But yes, they do have a statutory requirement to provide for foul water drainage and water provision for new developments that are approved. They just currently contend that statutory requirement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Martin.
I don't really want to drag this out too long, but Anglian Water have said that the connection point that they've recommended will solve the problem. The reason I'm asking the question is because the developer's agent seemed to suggest that they didn't like that solution and therefore they would look for an alternative which may or may not result in a communal Clargester solution. And if in the event that the communal Clargester solution or private drainage solution was the one they chose to go down, the route they chose to go down, I think somebody needs to have a very close look at that, because it will affect the development as a whole.
Before anyone else, in the interest of fairness, Councillor Prescott, I have to say I'm not entirely sure that what you've just said, the applicant's agent said, was entirely correct.
He's here.
And I'm not sure if constitutionally he's allowed to speak at this point, and I've just lost our lawyer. So, am I able to ask the applicant's agent to clarify what it was he said? Okay, all right. In my view, Martin, I thought that wasn't exactly what the agent's applicant said. However, feel free to come back. I know, and I'm not allowed to ask him, I'm told so. Councillor Tyson.
For what it's worth, I don't think that's what the applicant's agent was driving at. I think that there is an option for a connection further south of Duncots Close, which is being investigated. I wanted to just ask to what degree is a material consideration that the policy criterion in IC1 in the local plan, which says the fourth one, I think.
Sorry, Tom, can I ask you just to stop just a minute? I'm just conscious. Who was this question going to be aimed at?
I think we're asking the officer.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the officer was able to hear.
Thomas.
Okay, carry on, Tom. My apologies for interrupting.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to concur with Councillor Bryant in that we sat here on many an occasion and been informed that, you know, matters of water supply and foul water removal are down to the water companies, and it's their statutory duty to provide those services. So I'm slightly surprised that we're having this level of discussion as well on this particularly. Criterion 4 on IC1 is that there should be a detailed drainage strategy identifying water infrastructure required and mechanisms for delivery. Have we got that or have we not? I thought that we had reached a solution to that and that there was an answer, a resolution.
Who would like to answer that? Tom? Thomas?
Were you referencing the allocation criteria within the local plan, page 218?
Yeah.
And point 1, yes, the wording is addressing existing surface water flood risk issues through SUDs.
I was looking at point 4.
Point 4.
I thought that was pertinent to the... Point 5, beg your pardon.
Oh yes, detailed drainage strategy, identifying water infrastructure required, mechanisms for delivery. That's the one. And your question again.
The question is that in place here?
So I'd say, well, there are conditions from the LLFA, and for drainage, and water. It's part of. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I think our position is that subject to the conditions that have been recommended, including the environment agent, the condition from Anglian Water, it's satisfactorily dealt with through conditions.
Okay.
If I could just call our resident lawyer, Nazni, please.
Thank you, Chair. I fully appreciate the concerns that councillors have here this evening. Officers have said where development isn't considered acceptable, conditions can be imposed to make development acceptable. That is what has happened here. And those details will be submitted for a discharge of conditions. I understand that members have said they would like that to come to committee, but as Sam has set out, that is a matter that is delegated to officers. What we could do is, if members are minded to approve the application, is for consultations to take place with the chair and vice chairs as part of that delegation for discharge of conditions. But it is a delegated matter to discharge conditions, and officers have clearly said that all matters will be discussed with the technical experts who are the LLFA, and they will be taking technical advice from the LLFA. I understand the concerns, Councillor Prescott, about a potential different solution coming forward than what Anglian Water have suggested. Unfortunately, we can't control what may or may not come forward, and when those details come forward, only then can the local planning authority assess in consultation with the LLFA what has come forward and what whether or not they discharge a condition or refuse that application when it's coming. That is the position we're in.
Thank you. Martin.
I'm perfectly happy with that. My concern was that it needed to be addressed before the start of construction as opposed to the start of occupation. And I think the condition does say that. So I'm happy with that.
Any further questions to the officers before we move towards debate? Okay. Thomas.
Also, in addition to planning lawyers' inputs, the foul water condition references consultation with Anglian Water themselves as well. So there'll be another expert to consult. Thank you.
Okay. So the officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with the material planning reasons, I shall be proposing that we grant permission. Okay, I'm not seeing an alternative. Therefore, I propose that we grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in report. And sorry. Yeah. Sorry, so I just want to make sure we're okay with the. So I propose that we grant planning permission subject to conditions set out in the report and the additional foul water condition 24. Just wanted to check I had that one right. It's 24. So are we clear on that? Okay. Can I have a seconder, please? Sorry, just before.
Sorry, there was some other changes to the conditions. So there will be the omission of the archaeological conditions. That would be. So I'll just pull those up. Yeah. 22 and 23 can be dispensed with following the consultation with archaeology. And there is the lead local flood authority condition to add. Oh no, sorry, that's the other application. Forgive me. Sorry. I think so. Yes, the just checking. And of course, in my written update, I said condition 19 may be removed following discussions with the environmental health, but that will remain now. So I believe, yes, conditions 22, 23 can be removed, and the addition of the Anglian water condition with the any other solution can be added. Otherwise, I don't believe there's any other conditions to be added.
Okay, so if I've got this right, I'm proposing we grant planning permission subject to conditions set out in the report as amended in the supplementary report, and with the additional foul water condition 24. Are officers content with that as our proposition? Yeah. It will be. I think if we say of the additional foul water condition as numbered. May I have a seconder?
What I thought I was seconding in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Mantle. Right, debate. Gosh, we're debating out. No, Councillor Clayton. Sorry.
So I must admit, I'm still not super happy about this position. It doesn't feel that satisfactory to me. It's not about second guessing the experts, including our colleagues, or trying to predict what may be put forward in the future or otherwise. It's the fact that I just don't feel we have a complete picture in order to weigh the planning balance in this context. I don't really feel that we have a clear enough view of what the development will look like to understand what the harms might be and how that will balance against the benefits. So I think I will not be supporting this on the basis that I have outstanding concerns that I don't think give us enough information to make that judgment at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Mantle.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that frankly, we have to trust the experts. We're not experts. We're all lay people. We're judging the public interest. And I don't think this discussion is actually advancing this. We have effectively the water's flown under the bridge. Oh, it's probably an inappropriate metaphor, but never mind. In the sense this is now an allocated site, we have to find a strong reason to oppose it. And the items which we've been discussing, we could not possibly sustain an appeal without expert support. So if the experts are happy, we're stuck.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with. Well, I agree with what Councillor Clayton said in that I'm not happy about this. I can't say it any better than Councillor Peace did earlier on, but the drainage situation, the loss of the biodiversity loss, The housing mix for me is top heavy to obviously maximize profit. I think if you could, leave space there, you could achieve the biodiversity gain on the site. There's a lot of sites. I know we're viewing this one in isolation, but there's a lot of sites coming up in Ickleford. And if all of those sites chose to maximize the footprint and outsource the biodiversity gain elsewhere off-site through credits, then Ickleford would lose a lot of biodiversity. So I'm not happy about it on all those grounds that Councillor Peace raised. I agree on all those points. However, I do agree with Councillor Mantle in that we do trust the experts. There are conditions in place that mean it's very hard legally for us to refuse, but I am not happy. Yeah, I'm not happy with this application.
Councillor Bryant.
It's a difficult one. I think that Councillor Mantle has actually described the situation very well. Particularly concerned about the housing mix, biodiversity credits, but I think that's something that we're going to come across more and more. But I do think that it has been handled well by the officers, and that the experts have been consulted, and that we've actually covered everything. So I will be voting for the application.
Councillor McDonald, Caroline.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one thing, and that I think this is a very delicate site. And while I agree with Councillor Bryant, what she just said about the officers handling the situation as it stands, it could have suited a more sensitive approach, because it is by the applicant, by the whoever's drawn up the plans. It could have been done better in order to mitigate a lot of the issues that could potentially come up. It is a dense site. It's so dense. There's not even a tree, it doesn't look like. It's just, considering it was an orchard, it could have just been done a lot more sensitive.
I've sort of been just listening to what everyone's said, and when I was reading through this earlier, I feel really uneasy about the fact that we do have a chalk stream in this area. I feel really uneasy about the drainage situation, and I'm very much minded to not support that this application on that basis. So I do think there isn't enough information here for me to feel comfortable.
I'd pretty much echo what's been said. I don't think we've got a full picture here. And I think what we are looking at is not what could have been an ideal solution. I mean, except that the site is designated for development, there's nothing we can do about that. But I think there are some issues that could have been handled significantly better. I don't like the density. I don't like the mix of housing. We've done the foul water thing to death, so I accept all of that. I'm happy to trust the experts. I'm just not comfortable that we're seeing the best possible solution for this location. And on that basis, I wouldn't be happy to support it.
Councillor Mantle. Yeah.
Just briefly, one of the first things I was taught was that we have to determine the application before us, not what we might have liked to alternative application to have been.
So while there's no other speakers indicating at the moment, I think I will. Councillor Mantle said part of what I was intending to say. With the best respect to members, we can only judge the application. We're required by law or whatever to require the application in front of us, and that can be difficult because people think, but this plan, not other ones in Ickleford, not what may come. We have to judge this application on its merits and its merits alone. We could always, I think on pretty much every application we ever get, we could probably say we could do it better. and we want it done better. But again, we can only you have to take a decision on what's in front of you. It also probably falls on me to be the Grinch as ever, and I would draw councillors' attention to section 4.4 of the report and the planning balance. As ever, our friend the tilted balance applies here, and if we were to reject this, we have to be able to demonstrate that any negative things we can find, they have to heavily outweigh the benefits, which I will be honest, I am struggling to do at the moment, and I have to ask members when we vote, we take that into mind. We cannot ignore that factor. That's me. Does anyone else wish to add to the debate? I think Councillor Tyson does. Tom.
I haven't really got very much to add because you just summarised pretty much what was in my mind, and I think that in the overall balance of things, it's very hard to find arguments against this site which clearly and significantly outweigh the benefits. And given that the tilted balance does apply, it's an allocated site. There are some questions still, you know, in the mix as we've heard, which we hopefully will be resolved with conditions. And there are, you know, but I mean, basically, it's very hard to find criticisms of this proposal, which I think would hold up in an appeal situation. Basically, it might not be what, you know, everybody's cup of tea, but I mean, that's not really what we're here to decide. It's about literally what holds up in terms of policy and what legal requirements govern what we do here. So I agree with the chair, and I shall somewhat reluctantly vote in favour of this proposal.
Okay, if we have no further comments, then I will move us to a vote. The recommendation is to grant permission, with a reminder that was with, as per the supplementary report, with conditions 22 and 23 removed and a new 24 regarding additional foul water conditions added. Can I see all those in favour of granting?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And can I thank the committee for going through that quite, you know, in all seriousness, taking that very seriously, as it should be. I will suggest we have a brief pause there before the next application, if we may. Okay, if we're next time, I'm going to get Councillor Bright to hand out toffee, and then no one will be able to say anything, and that will speed up the meetings. Yeah, I'm just jealous because I didn't get any chocolate. Right. Item 6, application 2501-790 FP, land known as the Orchard, Snellswell Lane, Ickleford. Thomas Howe to present. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I have some updates for you. On the report, it said that the lead local flood authority had comments to follow. Representation has been received now recommending a condition, and I will read it for you. Construction shall not begin until a detailed surface water drainage scheme for the site has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The surface water drainage scheme must prioritise the use of source control sustainable drainage systems (SUDS) in consideration of the non-statutory technical standards for SUDS and demonstrate no increase in flood risk as a result of the proposed development, with sufficient supporting evidence to provided to support its viability, including supporting calculations for the 100% AEP bracket 1 in 1 year, 3.33% AEP bracket 1 in 30 year, 3.33% AEP 1 in 30 year, plus climate change, the 1% AEP brackets 1 in 100 year, and the 1% AEP 1 in 100 plus climate change critical storms. Infiltration testing shall be carried out to inform the detailed drainage design. If infiltration is not viable, a detailed drainage strategy based on discharging to the ordinary watercourses south of Snellswell Lane at the Greenfield runoff rate shall be submitted to the local planning authority. The scheme shall subsequently be implemented in accordance with the approved details before the development is completed. Reason: to ensure the flood risk is adequately addressed and not increased in accordance with NPPF and policies of North Hertfordshire District Council. If it is proposed to discharge to the ordinary watercourse south of Snellswell Lane, land drainage consent may be required from Hart County Council lead local flood authority. Oh, this is informative, apologies. Yeah, I'll restart the informative. If it is proposed to discharge to the ordinary watercourse south of Snellswell Lane, and land drainage consent may be required from Hertfordshire County Council lead local flood authority. The agent has agreed to this condition and to an extension of time until the 19th of February. I received a late archaeology representation yesterday morning or evening, apologies, which just advises no comments. I also recommend a condition from Environmental Health, which was included as part of their consultation and is in addition to the conditions listed, as well as the lead local flood authority condition. It reads: in the event that contamination is found at any time when carrying out the approved development, it shall be reported in writing immediately to the local planning authority. An investigation and risk assessment shall then be undertaken by a competent person in accordance with BS 10175:2011. A written report of the findings should be forwarded to for approval to the local planning authority. Following completion of remedial measures, a verification report shall be prepared that demonstrates the effectiveness of the remediation carried out. No part of the development should be occupied until all remedial and validation works are approved in writing. I also received a query from a resident today with regards to the plans. I believe there might be a discrepancy perhaps on our online plan or the mapping system, but the actual submitted plans I believe are correct. One of our plans or maps shows, I think it either incorrectly spells the Mildens as the Milders, or it shows the application site as being part of the neighbouring site, but the plans demonstrate what is present on site and what is proposed correctly. Therefore, sorry, back onto the conditions. I recommend that we grant conditional permission subject to the LLFA condition, the contamination condition, and the conditions already set out in my recommendation. Please, can the presentation be started? My slides, please. Oh, that's all my updates. There you go. There's the, I believe, the incorrect mapping system where it shows the Milders, but also shows the point or the name being on this plot of land rather than the dwelling to the left or the southwest, which is in fact the Mildens correctly. But as I say, the plans demonstrate this correctly rather than this mapping system. Next slide, please. This is the site plan. There you go, showing the Mildens on the left with the new dwelling accessed off Snellswell Lane with Glendale to the east. There would remain a strip of land between. Next slide, please. This is stood centrally within the site, looking towards the rear elevation of the Mildens, looking southeast. Next slide, please. This is looking towards the western end of Snellswell Lane. I believe this is outside a dwelling called the Rambling or the Rambler. I can't remember exactly, the Rambling, looking west. Next slide, please. And this is the Rambling or the dwelling Rambling, looking north. Next slide, please. This is, I believe, a view of the Mildens with the application site to the right-hand side of that picture. Next slide, please. This is a more oblique view down east along Snellswell Lane. The application site is beyond that brown fence, behind the trees and the post and rail fence. Next slide, please. This is a view of Glenmore, the neighbour opposite to the site. Next slide, please. And this is a view across Glendale, which is another dwelling across along Snellswell Lane. The fence belongs to Glendale, and then the hedged section is the adjoining plot of land, and then beyond that hedgerow line is the application site. Next slide, please. This is a property further east along Snellswell Lane. It should be, yes, Glendale. Next slide, please. Oh yes, that was Glendale, and this is a much further along to the east of Snellswell Lane, towards where the road splits off. Next slide, please. This is a view within the site looking backwards, so towards the rear boundary of the site, stood relatively centrally. The next slide, please. And then this is again looking at the front boundary of the site with Glenmore visible poking above the hedge. Next slide, please. And then this is a view to the left. This is, I believe, the southeastern corner of the site. Next slide, please. And then again, a view stood relatively close to the front boundary, looking backwards out of the site. Next slide, please. And this is looking to the western boundary towards the Mildens. And next slide, please. And then again, the southwestern corner of the site, the Mildens on the right and Glenmore to the left. Next slide, please. And then this is a view of the site from Snellswell Lane with the post and rail fence being the front boundary. Next slide, please. And I believe this is another view, but for the front of the Mildens. So this is taken from Snellswell Lane, the site is on the right. Next slide, please. And again, a further back, more open view of the site. Next slide. And more internal. This is towards the northern end of the site, outside of the application, but just for your information. Next slide, please. And again, the Mildens, more boundary photos and site photos. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for the planning officer? Councillor Bryant.
Thomas, did we have any pictures that showed the boat?
Yes, there was some looking towards, so the whole of Snellswell Lane, I believe, is the byway, or at least there's this tract of it is, and there was some, yes. It should be one of my first ones. Perhaps my second or third photo, if do you want it pulled up quickly?
I think as probably we'll be talking about the boat, that maybe the members might want to see
Sure.
photos.
Yes. There's one photo of the right of way, which is further west of the application sites, but yes, and there is another one. If you cycle through the photos, just some more general photos of it. There's one there. This is close. This is pretty much outside, just beyond the site, application site. Yeah.
Councillor Prescott.
I was somewhat confused by the constant reference to a boat, but anyway, am I right in saying this is not an adopted road?
Understand it's a byway, open to all traffic, which is the boat, of course.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, no, I got that.
But no, I don't. An adopted road.
I think the point I'm making while you're looking for that is that if it's not an adopted road, the Highways Agency don't have anything to say about it.
I think, if I'm correct, the right of way team at County Council might be responsible rather than Highways. But I'm happy to just quickly have a look on the Gazetteer quickly.
4.3.23 says Highways have withdrawn their objections, if that's any help. So
Well, they couldn't make an objection if it's not an adopted road anyway.
Perhaps that's why they withdrew them. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I note at paragraph 4.3.8 that the applicant has proposed that the site constitutes grey belt. Just wondering whether you can elaborate on the reasoning behind that and whether we agree with it.
Thomas.
So, of course, there was the Greenbelt assessment of the exceptions, and then, yes, we went on to the grey belt assessment, and I agree. Well, the report, of course, sets out that there is agreement with it being grey belt, and that we do not consider the conflicts with the purposes A and B and D, and that there are no strong reasons for refusal. So I'm just trying to pull the wording exactly.
There we go. So before I go into the grey belt, because it's one of my favourite subjects, as everyone knows, Councillor Prescott, the road or the boat that serves the development is maintained by Hertfordshire County Council as Highways Authority, according to the Gazetteer. On the grey belt, obviously we've written the report, it's been agreed. The wider parcel of green belt, as it were, may not be grey belt, but we're considering the site itself. So for the reasons given in the report, the site itself doesn't contribute to purpose A. The wider area around it, if developed, likely could be considered to contribute to purpose A. So purpose A is the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. The wider green belt to the north of Ickleford could be considered to be the only green belt in proximity to Hitchin to prevent its urban sprawl northwards. However, the site itself and the development proposed is such that it doesn't actually move any further north than the existing established rear and front building line along the street. So for that reason, we consider the site itself does not contribute strongly to Purpose A, which would preclude it from being grey belt if it did. The other purposes are not particularly relevant to the site or the wider green belt in this particular area.
Councillor Ryan.
Ask, is this being considered as an infill site?
Sorry, Thomas, I just clicked the button. I should have left that to you to start with. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Yes. So in my committee reports, principle of development, I considered exception. Sorry, I'm just to be sure. Exception E, paragraph 154, limited infilling in a village. So that is applied as part of the Greenbelt assessment. And then, of course, the Greybelt assessment follows. But yes, it is considered to be infill.
Can I have a follow-up question? Does that trump Greybelt?
Basically, what was added, so it was considered that if you got an exception in a Greenbelt, then that would apply. But because the applicants set out a Greybelt argument in their planning statement, we considered it was still prudent to assess that as well. So we consider it to be Greybelt, an exception for development in the Greenbelt, but also an assessment was made where we consider it to also be Greybelt. But the principle of development is supported either way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If we have no further questions for planning officers, which we don't, I shall take the first public objector, Philip Laws. Philip, you've got three minutes. I'll let you know when we have a minute left. Thank you for the prompt. Sorry, Philip, it's not eating into your time. If you could just hold on just 1 second. Otherwise, you can speak forever because the clock won't come up, actually. But I'd rather you wait.
Start. That shows the boat in a favourable light, by the way. It's not like that. Anyway.
Okay. Philip, in your own time.
Okay. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Snellswell Lane and a near neighbour of the proposed dwelling at the Orchard. I wish to raise 3 planning concerns: highway suitability, harm to the rural character of the lane, and loss of landscape features. Firstly, access. The site is served only by the boat section of Snellswell Lane, an unsealed, potholed and unadopted rural track. It is not constructed to highway standards and is already difficult for pedestrians, cyclists and those with limited mobility. The officer report refers to encouraging sustainable transport, including cycle provision. However, the reality on the ground is that the surface condition already makes cycling and safe shared use extremely challenging. Introducing construction vehicles, deliveries and additional residential traffic will inevitably worsen the situation and create clear safety risks. Furthermore, although the proposal is described as a 3-bedroom dwelling, the internal layout and room sizes appear capable of functioning as a 4-bedroom home. This would likely result in higher occupancy and increased vehicle movements, meaning the traffic impacts may be greater than has been assessed. Taken together, this does not represent safe or suitable access and, in my view, conflicts with local plan and transport policies that require development to be supported by appropriate infrastructure and not place unacceptable pressure on the existing network. Secondly, character and precedent. This section of Snellswell Lane has a distinctly rural, quiet nature. That character is exactly why people live here. Allowing new infill development along the boat risks gradually suburbanising the lane. One dwelling may seem small, but it establishes a principle making further proposals more likely. The cumulative effect would fundamentally change the character of the lane and undermine the countryside setting the local plan seeks to protect.
1 minute.
Finally, landscape and trees. The site has been named the Orchard, yet the healthy apple tree that defined it has already been removed. Policy NE2 of North Herts local plan seeks to protect existing landscape features and trees unless there is clear justification. The loss of that feature raises concerns about the protection of the site's remaining natural character. For these reasons, the unsuitable and unsafe access, the harm to the rural character of the lane, and the loss of important landscape features, I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application. This is not opposition to development in principle, but about ensuring development is in the right place. A substandard boat is simply not a suitable or sustainable location for new residential access. Residents are simply asking that existing planning policies be applied consistently, as approving developments served by an unsuitable rural byway set an unfortunate precedent and undermine both highway safety and the protection of Snailswell Lane's country character.
Thank you. Do the committee have any points of clarification? No? Okay. Our second public objector is Linda Eaton. Linda, you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know we have a minute left.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am the resident of Mildens, whose home sits directly beside the orchard, and I would live with the consequences of this decision every day. This is about the lasting impact on my family's home. The orchard has always functioned as open land, providing separation between properties and contributing to the character of Snailswell Lane. Building a substantial dwelling here would permanently remove that openness. Once this land is built on, it cannot be restored. The proposal would directly affect the entire east elevation of our home, our kitchen, utility room, master bedroom, children's bedroom, and family bathroom. Because of its proximity and scale, it would cause unacceptable loss of light and outlook and create an overbearing presence at our boundary. Although described as a 3-bedroom dwelling, the size and layout are capable of functioning as a 4-bedroom home. Planning must consider what a building can accommodate over its lifetime. That scale represents a higher intensity of use, with greater activity and vehicle movements than assessed. The height and bulk would appear imposing alongside the single-storey homes of Mildens and Glenmore opposite. First floor windows would directly overlook Glenmore, looking into private living areas. This would result in a permanent and daily loss of privacy for neighbouring residents. There are serious access concerns. The road is already constrained and in very poor condition. Construction traffic would further damage the road surface and cause regular obstruction. The route is used by residents, pedestrians, cyclists, and horse riders. Obstruction would create safety risks, restrict access to homes, and could impede emergency vehicles during construction. Once occupied, vehicle movements from a dwelling of this size would add further pressure to an access that is already difficult to navigate safely. This proposal delivers private benefit to one applicant at the expense of lasting harm to neighbouring amenity and a vulnerable access route.
1 minute.
In closing, the impact on my family's home, the loss of openness, the overbearing presence, the loss of privacy, and the pressure on access would be permanent. Once this land is built on, it's gone forever. I respectfully urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any points of clarification from members? Councillor Tyson.
Thanks. Could you just go over the overlooking aspect of what you were saying there, just to refresh my memory?
So the bungalow opposite, which is Glenmore, is a 1-storey bungalow, and the first floor windows of the orchard would look directly into I believe it's their bedroom and their dining room.
Okay, that's of the house opposite the plot.
The house opposite,
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Do members have any further questions to the speaker? No. In which case, our third public objector is Parish Councillor Philip Crow. Councillor Crow, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Ickleford Parish Council has already submitted a detailed, concise report on this proposed development, strongly objecting to the application, and this is to reiterate our comments and support those of the residents in Snailwell Lane likely to be affected. Snailswell Lane has remained one of the last semi-rural parts of Ickleford, and given it is also part of the green belt, not the grey, as the developer would wish, if allowed to be fully developed, would harm the openness of the area. It consists mainly of bungalows with the exception of 4 houses which were historically small holdings, producing food for self-usage. The proposed development is totally out of keeping with the existing properties, both in size and character, which will affect the loss of privacy to these properties. Entering and exiting the current lane is dangerous given its virtually single-track unmade road, in fact described as a boat on the definitive map, with limited space for any vehicles to turn, and the area would be totally unsuitable to accommodate any developer vehicles. Taken its definition as outlined whilst a limited highway, it is really intended purely for walkers and horse riders. Unfortunately, today's type of traffic being heavy in size, it creates damage to the lane surface and with incessant rain drains into ditches, which eventually empty into the River Hiss, a protected chalk stream. Any new development in this area can only cause further damage to the existing road surface, and given the aged draining system in existence, would cause further hazards to the current residents. Mention has been made about the drainage problems in the area, and the sewerage wastewater pipework that the developer intends to connect into is already incapable of serving the existing houses in Snailswell Lane. Anglia are well aware of the problem, which again causes great distress to the houses at the lower end of the lane's incline, with sewerage backwash entering homes and gardens. The site is also known for its wildlife and natural habitat with many species of animals, and there is hardly likely to have any protection put in place for these animals. The Hedgerow Regulations 1997 protects important hedgerows from being removed for at least 30 years old, and the hedgerow that sides this development has been established for over 35 years and gives a natural edging and wildlife habitat should at all costs be protected. All local planning authorities have to ensure there is no loss of biodiversity on a site or habitat connectivity and to enhance biodiversity. This land has been accessible to many ranges of wildlife, and without any protection from this possible development, it could well be the natural corridors and habitats will be lost. The history of this area and the numerous points highlighted far outweigh the benefits of this proposed development being built, and the Parish Council strongly support the various objections submitted by residents to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Do we have any points of clarification from members and the Speaker? No. Okay, then if we can have the member advocate, Councillor Louise Peace. Louise, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application to build a 4-bedroom dwelling in the rural greenbelt of Ickleford. I'm asking committee to refuse this application on the grounds that this is inappropriate development in the greenbelt. It is contrary to policies in the local and neighbourhood plan and that the site is not sustainable. I am also concerned that the applicant has described the dwelling as a 3-bedroom home for which there is recognised need in the neighbourhood plan, when the study in the property is large enough to be a 4th bedroom in planning terms. The impact of a 4-bedroom dwelling has not been adequately considered. Paragraph 154 of the NPPF sets out the circumstances where development may be permitted within the greenbelt. One of these is limited infilling in a village. However, this site is not within the defined settlement boundary of Ickleford. I hope that members have had a chance to visit this site in person or via an online map just to appreciate how rural it really is. Ickleford is one of 5 villages that was allocated for larger amounts of housing within the local plan. Policy SD2 of that plan refers to development within the settlement boundary. This application is contrary to Policy SD2 and also Policy SD1 of the Ickleford Neighbourhood Plan, which only supports infill within the settlement boundary. The applicant argues that this is a grey-belt site. Regardless of the colour of the site, paragraph 115 of the NPPF tells us that it is required that safe and sustainable access to the site can be achieved for all users. This is not a sustainable site. Snailswell Lane at this point is a boat, a byway open to all traffic. Herts County Council's Rights of Way team defined this as a highway over which the public have a right of way for vehicular and all kinds of traffic, but which is used by the public mainly for the purpose for which footpaths and bridleways are so used. This means the route is effectively maintained to bridleway standard, as there is no onward route for vehicles. The residents of Snelswell Lane on the boat already experience issues accessing their properties in vehicles due to the poor surface of the lane. After rainfall, that lane is impassable by cycle, and anyone with mobility issues attempting to wheel on this boat would be unable to. The nearest bus stop is over half a kilometre away, and no bus from that stop calls at either Hitchin or Letchworth Station. At 4.3.7, the officer's report mentions appeal decisions. It should be noted there have been no appeals on land in the boat section of Snelswell Lane. Another reason to refuse is this dwelling does not fit the street scene at the location. The design codes prepared for Ickleford's neighbourhood plan use neighbouring the Mildens as an example of properties in the Greenbelt and state that they should be a minimum in height of 1 storey plus pitch. You saw examples of this as the Ramblings and Glenmore. This new proposed dwelling is too great in height for this location. An image of the dwelling placed between Glendale and the Mildens does not show the properties beyond the Mildens, which are much lower. This is in conflict with policy SD3 of the neighbourhood plan, which does not support new development that does not align with the design codes or is not of an appropriate scale in relation to its setting. In addition to harming the amenity of the Mildens, the dwelling also harms the residential amenity of Glenmore to the south. Residents on Snelswell Lane have reported flooding. This development would replace permeable ground with hard standing, increasing runoff and flood risk to neighbouring properties. Although Anglian Water has a statutory duty to connect to the sewerage system, residents towards the Ickleford end of the lane have experienced their garden covered in sewage after heavy rainfall due to failures to upgrade the infrastructure. A Grampian condition should be imposed on Anglian Water to ensure that necessary remedial work has taken place before any dwelling here is occupied. This is to ensure that the additional flows from the development have no detrimental effect on existing residents. This application should be refused as the site is not sustainable, the dwelling is too high to fit the street scene, it does not comply with the Ickleford Neighbourhood Plan Design Code, and it has an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the Mildens and Glenmore. If committee are minded to grant this application, I would ask you to consider that although the UK is one of the most habitat depleted countries in the world, this application is not subject to BNG requirements as it is submitted as a self-build. As we see more applications coming forward in the Greenbelt, we need to ensure that habitat is protected. I respectfully ask that the committee consider adding a condition to ensure that the dwelling remains the main residence of the applicant for 3 years, and that a condition of this type be added for any future self-build applications in the Greenbelt in North Herts.
Do we have any questions for Councillor Peace? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Did I hear you saying that about the buses, that there weren't any buses to railway stations?
It goes to Stevenage railway station, but it doesn't go to Hitchin or Letchworth.
So we've got the 9A that goes from Bedford bus station, which is not close to Bedford railway station, and then it goes through Arlesey, as near as anything goes to Arlesey station, and then it goes to the hospital in Stevenage, and then to Stevenage bus station, which is facing Stevenage railway station.
But it doesn't go to the 2 nearest stations to the location, which would be Hitchin and Letchworth.
It does go to Hitchin though. I just think that I do get on the buses, and I think
it does go to Hitchin, but the Hitchin stop is a long way from the station.
Okay, so we've had boats and buses all in one thing. Do we have any further? Councillor Bryant wants another go.
No,
Go on.
No, I'm going.
Not trains or planes or automobiles, right? Do we have any other further questions for Councillor Peace? At which point, as there's no applicant to speak, Councillor Peace, I think
One matter raised regarding B&G, there is an ecological enhancements plan condition recommended by the council ecologist. It is a standard condition, and it accords with policy NE4 of the local plan. I did note Councillor Peace's comments. She contacted me the other day just about the study, and it does meet space standards criteria for a bedroom. However, the parking standard would remain the same. It would still be for 2 spaces off street. Otherwise, I have no other points to add unless Sam has any.
You definitely look like you're itching to say something.
So the condition requested in respect to self-build or custom dwellings in order to ensure that the development that goes ahead qualifies for the exemption from biodiversity net gain. I guess I'll give my professional official opinion on that, which is it fails to meet the test of necessity. The operative part of the planning permission is the description of development, and in this case it reads the erection of 1 self-build dwelling, including so and so. So as self-build is already in the operative part of the permission, it is not necessary to put a condition on to make the development self-build. It will be self-build because the description of development says it's self-build, and if it's found not to be self-build, we will be able to enforce against it. That being said, if the committee did wish to explore the wording of a condition, I could find some wording.
Thank you. Just before bringing, actually, you go first. I've got a question, but after you, Martin. Martin Prescott.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask a question about the self-build nature. What are the criteria? Sorry, let me reference to one of the points that Councillor Pearce made, namely that if it's self-build, so the implication is that the developer is the owner, is going to be the occupant. Can we condition it that the developer / owner / occupant stays there for a minimum period of time to achieve the self-build description, or is that we can't do that?
Sam?
I would maintain that it would still not be a necessary condition because the definition of self-build stays the same, regardless of whether you condition it or not. However, the minimum of 3 years originates from the definition of self-build as it applies to community infrastructure levy regulations, where if it's self-build, you don't need to pay CIL. And that particular definition specifies that it has to be occupied by the same person who builds the dwelling for 3 years. So I maintain that it's not necessary. However, 3 years is relevant in respect to a time period, as it's the only time period that can be found in any definition of self-build is in the CIL regulations.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just follow that up? So let's say it satisfies the criteria, the person builds it, then moves in with the family and all the rest of it, but then a year's time decides to sell it. I mean, does that then become an enforcement matter? Or, I mean, what powers does the planning authority have to actually enforce that condition? Sorry, I shouldn't use the word condition because it's not a planning condition, but what the self-build criteria. So in other words, if they move out in a year's time or in 6 months or a week's time, what can we do about it?
That's a very good question. And it comes down to the enforceability of the condition as well. If we have a condition on there that says that the occupier must be in there for a minimum period of 3 years, I'm not sure what enforcement powers we could use. We could only enforce against the person who owns the land at the time, which would be the person who moves in, not the person who moves out.
So it's fairly meaningless condition then, really.
I'll stay quiet on that one.
Well, perhaps we could ask the legal officer. I mean, I understand why Councillor Pearce is asking for it. It makes perfect sense, because designating a property as self-build gets it around an awful lot of other conditions. And if it then becomes a mockery because they move out a week later or never actually move in the first place, I mean, it's not really in keeping with either the spirit or the letter of the law.
Okay.
That's your cue, legal officer.
I think before Nazanin comes in, I'm going to jump in because I've got another question, which I was also going to throw in her direction. But two questions really. One is around this 3-year condition that was mooted, and I'm slightly nervous of putting in conditions that are unenforceable. And it strikes me that you could say someone's got to live there for 3 years, but life happens, and if in 18 months there's some family tragedy and they have to move to Norfolk or something, I'm not a lawyer here, so I'll leave the lawyer to answer how enforceable that would be. So in case of that one, I'm still interested to know how viable the suggested condition that they have to stay there for 3 years is. My second one is, it's also been mooted several times by speakers about there's a room that could be a 4th bedroom. So my other question to Nazanin is to what extent, if at all, can we lean on that as a planning committee? Or because that seems to be we're speculating as what a room might become.
Before I forget that second limb of the question, I'm going to deal with that first. As we said previously this evening, we have to look at the application that is before us. Without wanting to sound like a broken record, but we do have to look at the application that is before us and what has been presented to us. We could speculate about it could be this or it could be this, but it just does come down to what is before you and what information you have before you, and to take into account all of that when coming to your decision. In terms of the condition in planning law, any conditions that are imposed on a planning application have to meet 6 tests, and 2 of those tests are necessity and enforceability. If it's not possible to enforce a condition, it shouldn't be imposed on a planning application. If it's not necessary, equally, it shouldn't be imposed on a planning application. There are other tests, whether it's reasonable, whether it's precise, and all of these needs to be taken into account. But we've already drawn our attention to 2 of them, and the planning officer said it's not necessarily necessary, and we have also discussed how would it be enforced. So I think to members, the answer is there. 2 limbs out of the 6 which have to be met don't appear to be met, so such a condition would fail ultimately.
Thank you. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question about the consultation with HCC Footpaths and Highways. We've heard quite a bit. We've seen the pictures of the famous boat, and clearly, we've heard also from the objectors about the unsuitability of that road for heavy traffic and so forth in the course of the construction. In paragraph 3.6, in the quoted section, it says, prior to construction, the unsealed section of Snailswell Lane leading up to the development site should be resurfaced to a highway sealed standard in order to accommodate building traffic and increased vehicular use that will result from the development. I don't think that that's been translated into a condition unless I missed it, in which case I apologize. But just wondering whether you can clarify what happened to that point and how that fits in relative to the objections we've heard. Thanks.
Sure. So I discussed the matter with the highways officer in emails, and he said he's happy for this to be put on record. He said, with regard to the surfacing, it's not something that we can force on the developer, but I would stress that as the route is not a road, it will be maintained to just byway standard. The route is not maintained to a standard suitable for construction, heavy traffic vehicle, and as such, we assert that There are no recreational vehicles using the route. There are no plans, and as such, because of the no recreational vehicles using the routes, there are no plans to increase the standard to which it is maintained. They basically advised that to make the applicants aware that the standard of the surface material might fall below what they would expect, but the byway team will continue to inspect the surface before the construction starts, and the developer will then be asked to make the surface good and repair any damage arising from it. But they said they can't force it on them, if that makes sense. Because I did twig that. I thought, is there a condition that could have been asked for? But no, that was the advice they gave me.
Chair, may I follow up? So do I understand then we're saying that they would be asked to make good very nicely, but we're not in a position that we can actually impose a condition, and there's no actual obligation on them to do anything?
I think so, but as I say, I think the Right to Way team said that they would maintain it to byway standard. But I think the crux of it was some people might come into it expecting a fully paved surface as the buyer, but to be just aware that it is a byway and that the surface material is different. And I think that was what they were trying to say, that yes, they can't go do this, but they could ask to make good. But yeah, that's basically the idea of their email to me.
So in practice, it may be that the surface ends up being in a worse condition. In fact, it's probably likely that it's in a worse condition than it is at the moment.
Perhaps, but they will inspect before, and then I guess they could assess if there is any damage that arises. But they didn't recommend any conditions to secure that.
Sorry, can I ask about the viability of adding a condition? I mean, it's a condition around at least making good the surface of the byway in the form that it, at least in the form that it currently is.
I'm just slightly worried if we're imposing a condition when highways have not asked for one, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'm just slightly confused how this all pans out.
Yeah. Who wants to have a go at that one?
Whilst Thomas is looking, so there's that particular representation that we are considering is from the Public Right of Way team rather than Hertfordshire Highways Authority. The condition would require unspecified works to carry out on land managed by the Highways Authority. Usually a condition wouldn't well, I'd have to think of the wording of the condition and be presented with the wording of the condition, but it seems like it would be stretching the condition a bit further than would be able to be achieved. I'll think about it a bit more whilst Thomas is having a look.
In terms of imposing a condition, oh, that went loud. In terms of imposing a condition to, let me just, sorry, my laptop won't let me in, so I'm just using Sam's here. Which would require the boat to be resurfaced to a highway seal standard in order to accommodate building traffic and increase vehicular use that would result from the development. Requiring that as a condition on a planning application would be unreasonable because the boat isn't in the control of the applicant. So it's the rights of way team which have provided comments. So it wouldn't be reasonable to accept the applicant to require the highway to be maintained to a certain standard when it is not only, it's not in the sole use of the applicant, but the boat is used by everybody else. So in a sense, it's an existing boat used by, well, all traffic. So we can't require where there is an existing, let's say, issue. It may not be an issue, but let's call it, whereas it's issue is you can't require the applicant for this planning permission to be required to maintain that to a highway sealed standard, which will be used by everybody else as well. It wouldn't be reasonable. So going back to the tests we spoke about that set out in the PPG, the planning practice guidance, it would fail to be reasonable, and it's something which would be out of the control of the applicant and not reasonable to require them to do such works.
Councillor Prescott.
I'm looking at condition 5 now. The paragraph right at the bottom of page 40, post-construction restoration reinstatement of the working areas. One must assume there's going to be construction traffic there, and there's likelihood of there to be damage to the surface, whatever the surface is. How does the council enforce that? If there is damage that the developer just ignores a request to reinstate, does the council routinely take some kind of a bond so that there are funds there to carry out the reinstatement if the developer chooses for whatever reason not to do so?
Condition 5.
Yeah, right at the bottom of page 40.
Yeah.
Just trying to make sure I understand the question correctly. You're talking about a bond, so you're worried about the enforceability of the condition in respect to getting the applicants to undertake the restoration work based on. Well, it's our condition primarily. It's been asked for by Hertfordshire Highways Authority, who obviously deal with these matters quite regularly. Usually see it in respect to construction method statements where you've got heavy vehicles accessing sites with curbs, and they usually want restoration of any curbs that have been damaged during construction. It hasn't been a problem previously, in my experience, the enforceability of that condition.
I think, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think and it's been highlighted by a number of the public objectors as a condition of the boat. I mean, it's not a properly, I don't know what the word is, but a surfaced highway, and it wouldn't need to be because it's a byway. But if in fact, you can just imagine after heavy rains, which we seem to have in this country all the time, some big construction vehicles churning up and down that byway, making a real mess of what surface there is there. I can entirely understand why the Highways Authority would want it reinstated, because they're going to have to pay for it if the developer doesn't. And my question is, if the developer just essentially shrugs his shoulder and does not honour that condition, it's unenforceable from our point of view. And I think the legal officer has made that point very clearly. Would it not be wise in that circumstance to take a bond from the developer so that we don't have to chase anybody for the money? We've already got it. And if we don't need it, we give it back.
Chair, what condition 5 does is it requires the applicant to submit a construction method statement. We're talking about condition 5, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah.
To submit a construction method statement to be submitted to and improved. And
I think
that-
my point is I'm sorry to cut across you there, but I think my point is going further down that condition and right to the bottom of page 40. If the developer simply does not keep to the construction management statement and we end up with the residents end up with the surface on the byway, which is in significantly worse condition, how would you made the point that we shouldn't impose anything that's unenforceable? How would we then enforce it?
But yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the point I was coming to was this condition would be enforceable because it says after it has been approved, thereafter the construction of the development should only be carried out in accordance with the approved plan, which is the approved construction method statement. And if it isn't carried out, so when you go to the bottom of page 40, post-construction, restoration, reinstatement of the working area, if that isn't carried out in accordance with the approved construction method statement, then we would be able to take enforcement action by way of a breach of condition notice, but an enforcement notice may be more appropriate because the enforcement notice would require them to comply with that method statement, which would include the post-construction reinstatement to the standard that is required in that method statement. So this condition is enforceable to require that. So a bond wouldn't be necessary.
Okay. Do we have any further questions to the officers? No further comments from the officers? Nope. Okay. So the officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with material planning reasons, I should be proposing that we grant permission. Okay, therefore I propose we grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the report, the additional condition 15 outlined in the supplementary document, and the additional condition 16 regarding contamination. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Billing. Thank you. Debate. We debate as you wish. Committee. No. Okay, then we will move to a vote. The proposal is to grant the application. You never know what to say. What is?
Chair, that motion is carried.
To allow the members of the public to leave should they wish, and for someone to recover. Councillor Peace. Okay, item 7, planning appeals. Sam DeCoco to present. Sam.
Good evening, members. We've had 2 appeal decisions. One at Ickleford Primary School for the installation of a bike shelter and some lighting and some hard surfacing, where the appeal was allowed. The inspector concluded a neutral impact on the conservation area and the school in general. So lessons learned on that one. And we've also got the retrospective application for a south roof slope box dormer and north roof slope. So 2 dormers on the south and 1 box dormer on the north for continued use of a property as a 1-bed studio. That was dismissed, with the inspector concluding that there was sufficient harm on the character and appearance of the area, and also sufficient harm on nearby heritage assets and their setting, as well as harm on living conditions. And as that is a retrospective application, appeal has been dismissed on, it will be referred for enforcement action. If there are any questions on the appeals, happy to answer.
Councillor Tyson.
What might the enforcement action constitute then, if it's a retrospective application for something that shouldn't have been done and then the appeal was dismissed? Does it have to be restored to the original condition?
I don't want to prejudice Christella's action. However, yes, that would be certainly on the table, restoration to its original condition.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions of Sam? All done? That was an information note only, no vote required. So if it's no other business, I will close the meeting. The next meeting of the Planning Committee is on Tuesday, the 24th of February. Thank you very much for your attention.